This new Rome will be a beacon of the Christian world. Ensure the Hippodrome is magnificent.
Imagine the world at the close of the 3rd century. The sun, once shining brightly on the golden eagle of Rome, now seems to cast long, weary shadows across a fractured empire. This is not the Rome of Augustus, of Trajan, or Marcus Aurelius. T. Pax Romana. The famed Roman peace that had held for 2 centuries is now a distant, almost mythical memory, whispered by grandfathers to disbelieving children. The air itself feels heavy, thick with uncertainty and the scent of distant battles. The Roman Empire, a behemoth that once stretched from the misty shores of Britannia to the sun-scorched sands of Mesopotamia, is groaning under its own immense weight. It is a giant on its knees, bleeding from 1,000 cuts. From without, the threats are relentless. Along the Rhine and Danube rivers, tribes the Romans dismissively call barbarians, Goths, Alemanni, Franks, are no longer just raiding parties. They are migrating peoples, nations on the move, pressing against the frontiers with the force of a tidal wave. In the east, a resurgent Persian empire under the ambitious Sassanid dynasty challenges Rome's dominance, their heavy cavalry a fearsome match for the once invincible legions. The borders are no longer clear lines on a map. They are simmering, volatile zones of constant, brutal conflict. But the greatest wounds are the real rot is from within. The 3rd century has been a century of crisis, a dizzying, bloody carousel of empire. The position of Augustus is no longer a lifetime appointment earned through merit or lineage. It is a death sentence, a prize to be seized by the strongest, most ruthless general. Men are hailed as emperors on the battlefield by their loyal troops, only to be murdered months, sometimes just weeks, later by those same troops when the promise of riches runs dry, or another, more charismatic commander appears. This era is known as the crisis of the 3rd century for a reason. In a span of just 50 years, from 235 to 284, more than 20 men claimed the title of emperor. Most met violent ends. Think about that. An entire generation lived and died without knowing a single, stable ruler. The constant civil wars drained the treasury, stripped the frontiers of their best defenders, and leave the provinces vulnerable. The economy is in shambles. The silva denarius, the backbone of Roman currency, has been debased so severely it's little more than a bronze coin with a light silver wash. Hyperinflation runs rampant. A soldier's pay, once a handsome sum, can barely buy a loaf of bread. Trade routes, once safe under the protection of the legions, are now plagued by bandits and deserted by merchants. The great Roman roads, marvels of engineering, fall into disrepair. The world, it seems, is shrinking. In the cities, the mood is grim. The grand monuments of a bygone era, the Colosseum, the aqueduct, the triumphal arches stand is silent, mocking reminders of a lost glory. Plagues sweep through the crowded urban centers, leaving devastation in their wake. People turn away from the traditional gods of the Roman pantheon, who seem deaf to their pleas. New faiths, mystery cults from the east promising salvation and personal connection to the divine, gain traction. Among them, a still small but fervent religion called Christianity offers a message of hope and community in a world that feels hopeless and fractured. The empire is literally breaking apart. For a time, it splinters into 3 separate states: the Gallic Empire in the west, the Palmyrene Empire in the east, and the Central Roman state, struggling to hold the core territories of Italy and Africa. It is a world of divided leadership, where loyalty is a commodity and survival is a daily struggle. Generals fight generals, brother fights brother, and the fabric of Roman society unravels thread by thread. The very idea of being Roman is changing. For centuries, it meant being part of a stable, ordered, and prosperous world. Now, it means living in fear. Fear of the tax collector, whose demands become ever more extortionate to pay for endless wars. Fear of the recruiting sergeant, who might press your sons into a legion from which they will likely never return. Fear of the barbarian war horn sounding in the distance, a sound that means your farm, your village, your entire world is about to be burned to the ground. This is the state of the Roman world in the year 284 AD. It is an empire on the brink of total collapse. The Golden Age is not just fading, it is all but extinguished. The light of civilization seems to be flickering, ready to be swallowed by an encroaching darkness. It is a time that cries out for a savior, for someone with the strength, the vision, and the sheer ruthlessness to pull the empire back from the abyss. The world holds its breath. The stage is set. Out of this chaos, this crucible of fire and blood, a new kind of ruler is about to emerge. He is not a senator from an ancient family, nor a philosopher king. He is a soldier, born of humble origins in the Balkans. A man forged in the brutal realities of this new, savage age. His name is Dio, and his arrival will not be a gentle restoration of the old ways. It will be a storm, a revolution from the top down. A radical reshaping of the Roman world that will pave the way for a new era. The age of the dominate is about to dawn, and the Roman Empire, and indeed the world, will never be the same again. This is where our story truly begins. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back in time. If you're fascinated by the epic story of Rome, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next chapter in this incredible saga. We have so much more to explore together. See you in the next video. Welcome back to our series on the Titans of history. Today, we journey back to the late 3rd century to witness the birth of a man who would forever change the course of the Roman Empire and, indeed, the world. This is the story of Constantine the Great, beginning in a rugged military town far from the gilded halls of Rome. Our story starts Harun the Lear, 272 AD, in the city of Nisus, a bustling military outpost in the Roman province of Mysia Superior. Today, we know this city as Niš, in modern-day Serbia. It was here, amidst the constant coming and going of legions and the palpable tension of a frontier city, that a boy named Flavius Valerius Constantinus was born. This boy, born not into the established aristocracy of Rome, but on the very edge of the empire, was destined for greatness. So, who were the parents of this future emperor? His father was a man named Constantius, a high-ranking military officer from the Balkans. He was a rising star in the Roman army, known for his ambition, skill, and a pale complexion that earned him the nickname Chloris, meaning the pale. Constantius was a man on the move, a formidable figure climbing the treacherous ladder of Roman power. His career was his life, and everything, including his family, was influenced by its trajectory. Constantine's mother was a woman named Helena. Her origins are a bit more mysterious and debated by historians. She was likely from a humble background in the Greek-speaking eastern part of the empire, perhaps an innkeeper's daughter. It's unclear whether she was Constantius's legal wife or his concubine, a common arrangement for soldiers of the era. What is clear, however, is that she was a woman of remarkable strength and devotion. While Constantius was forging a path through military campaigns and political intrigue, it was Helena who provided the stable foundation for young Constantine's early life. Her influence, especially her later devotion to Christianity, would become one of the most significant factors in his entire reign. Growing up in Nisus, Constantine's world was not one of senatorial debates or luxurious villas. It was the world of the Roman army. His earliest memories would have been the sights and sounds of a military camp, the clang of swords in the training yard, the disciplined march of legionaries, the stories of far-off battles told by veteran soldiers. This environment was his first and most important school. It taught him discipline, leadership, and the harsh realities of life and death. He learned to ride a horse, to wield a sword, and, most importantly, he learned the language of power spoken by the Roman legions. He wasn't just a boy. He was the son of a commander, and the expectations were immense from day one. The Roman Empire during Constantine's childhood was a chaotic and dangerous place. The 3rd century had been marked by constant civil wars, economic collapse, and barbarian invasions, a period so tumultuous it is known as the crisis of the 3rd century. To bring order to this chaos, the Emperor Diocletian implemented a radical new system of government in 293 AD. He created the Tetrarchy, or the Rule of Four. The empire was divided into an eastern and western half, each ruled by a senior emperor, an Augustus, and a junior emperor, a Caesar. The Caesars were the designated successors, creating a clear line of succession intended to prevent the civil wars that had plagued the empire. This political earthquake had a direct and dramatic impact on Constantine's life. His father, the skilled general Constantius Chlorus, was chosen by the Western Augustus, Maximian, to be his Caesar. This was a monumental promotion. Constantius was now second in command of the entire Western Roman Empire. But this incredible honor came at a great personal cost. To solidify his new political alliance, Constantius was required to divorce or set aside Helena, Constantine's mother, a woman of lower social standing. He was then married to Theodora, the stepdaughter of the Emperor Maximian. For young Constantine, who was around 21 at the time, this must have been a devastating blow. His father, now a Caesar, was sent to govern Gaul and Britain, taking his new wife with him. His mother, Helena, was cast aside, a political casualty in her husband's rise to power. And Constantine himself, he was sent east to the court of the most powerful of the four rulers, the senior Augustus Diocletian. He was, for all intents and purposes, a political hostage. His presence at Diocletian's court was a guarantee of his father's good behavior and loyalty. If Constantius stepped out of line, his son would pay the price. So, at a young age, Constantine was thrust from the military camps of the frontier into the very heart of imperial power, a world of gilded cages, whispering courtiers, and deadly political games. Life in Diocletian's court was another kind of education. Here, he wasn't just learning military strategy. He was learning the art of survival. He observed the intricate dance of power, the subtle insults, the hidden alliances, and the ever-present threat of betrayal. He served as a high-ranking military tribune under Diocletian and his successor, Galerius, campaigning on the Danube and in the east. He fought bravely, distinguishing himself in battle and earning the respect of the soldiers. But he always had to be careful. He was the son of a rival Caesar, a potential threat, and he was being watched. These years were crucial in forging the man Constantine would become. He developed a deep understanding of both military and political power. He learned to be patient, to bide his time, to read the intentions of powerful men, and to present a face of unwavering loyalty while nursing his own ambitions. He saw firsthand the strengths and weaknesses of the Tetrarchy. He also witnessed the beginning of the great persecution of Christians, initiated by Diocletian in 303 AD. The brutal suppression he saw in Nicomedia, one of the centers of the persecution, would leave a lasting impression on him, while Constantine navigated the dangerous currents of the Eastern Court. His father, Constantius, was earning a reputation in the West as a capable and relatively humane ruler. He governed his provinces of Gaul and Britain effectively, securing the frontiers and winning the loyalty of his subjects in his army. He largely ignored the harshest edicts of the Christian persecution in his territories, a decision that further distinguished him from his colleagues. In 305 AD, the unthinkable happened. In a move unprecedented in Roman history, Diocletian and his co-Augustus Maximian both voluntarily abdicated, stepping down from power to allow their Caesars to rise. According to the plan of the Tetrarchy, Constantius Chlorus became the new Augustus of the West, and Galerius became the Augustus of the East. The system seemed to be working, but there was a problem. When it came time to appoint new Caesars, Constantine was passed over. Galerius, who was deeply suspicious of Constantine's popularity and ambition, instead promoted two of his own loyalists. This was a public humiliation and a clear sign that Constantine's life was in danger. Galerius now held all the cards. With Constantius ill and aging in the West, Galerius likely planned to eliminate Constantine and consolidate his own power over the entire empire. Constantine knew he had to escape. The story goes that one night, after a dinner where he had managed to get Galerius's drunken permission to leave, Constantine fled the court. He rode hard through the night, crippling the post horses at each station behind him to prevent pursuit. It was a desperate race against time. He rode across Europe, a journey of hundreds of miles, finally reaching his father in Boulogne, in Gaul. Just as Constantius was preparing to cross the Channel into Britain for a campaign against the Picts, The reunion must have been incredible. The father, now a senior emperor, and the son, a fugitive, were together again. Constantine joined his father on the campaign in Britain. For the soldiers of his father's army, who had known and respected Constantius for years, the arrival of his tall, charismatic, and battle-hardened son was a momentous occasion. They saw in him the image of his father and a worthy successor. Sadly, Constantius's health was failing. After a successful campaign, he died in the city of Eberacum, modern-day York, England, in July of 306 AD. His death should have plunged the empire back into chaos. But Constantius had made his wishes known. His loyal army, ignoring the official succession of the Tetrarchy and the will of Galerius, did what Roman armies had so often done. They proclaimed their own leader. On July 25, 306, the legions in Britain hailed Constantine as their new Augustus. This single act shattered Diocletian's carefully constructed tetrarchy. The son of the scorned Helena, the political hostage, the overlooked heir, had just been declared emperor by his troops on the misty fringes of the Roman world. It was a direct challenge to the established order and the first shot in a new series of civil wars that would decide the fate of the empire. Constantine's journey, which began in a humble military town, had now brought him to the throne, or at least to a claim for one. The boy from Nasus was now a contender for the world, but his fight had only just begun. Thank you for watching this chapter of Constantine's story. His early life shows us how adversity, political maneuvering, and military experience can forge a leader. Join us next time as we dive into the chaotic civil wars of the Tetrarchy, where Constantine will face off against multiple rivals in a desperate struggle for supreme power, culminating in the legendary Battle of the Milvian Bridge. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss it. Say you 10. Imagine the Roman Empire in the late 3rd century. It's a colossal entity, but it's teetering on the brink of collapse. For 50 years, it's been torn apart by civil wars, economic ruin, and barbarian invasions. Emperor after emperor is assassinated. This is the crisis of the 3rd century, and Rome is bleeding. Then, a man named Diocletian, a brilliant soldier from humble beginnings, rises to power. He looks at this sprawling, chaotic empire and realizes one man alone cannot save it. It's simply too big, too complex, and too broken. So, Diocletian comes up with radical solution. One of the most audacious political experiments in history. The Tetrarchy, or rule by 4. He decides to slice the empire in half, creating an Eastern and a Western Roman Empire. But he doesn't stop there. He knows that succession is the root of most civil wars. Wants to be the next emperor. To solve this, he appoints a co-emperor, a fellow general named Mac, to rule the West while he takes the East. Each of them holds the title of Augustus. But wait, it gets even more clever. To ensure a smooth transfer of power, each Augustus adopts a junior emperor, called a Caesar Diocletian. Chooses Galerius as his Caesar in the East, and Maximian chooses a man named Constantius Chlorus in the West. That's our Tetrarchy. 2 senior emperors, the Augusti and Tujunia emperors, the Caesars, for men, for capitals, for armies, all working together to govern and defend the vast Roman world. For a time, it works brilliantly. The borders are secured, the economy is stabilized, and a sense of order returns. The system was designed to be a meritocracy, a machine of governance that was bigger than any single man. But there's a problem with machines made of ambitious men, ego, and hidden in the court of Diocletian in the East is a young man, a political hostage of sorts, watching this grand experiment unfold. His name is Constantine. He is a son of the Western Caesar Constantius. Why is he in the East? Because Diocletian wants to keep an eye on him, to ensure his father's loyalty. So, young Constantine grows up in the heart of power, but without any real power of his own. He's a spectator in a deadly Game of Thrones. He observes Diocletian's administrative genius, but he also sees the simmering tensions. He watches the rivalry between his own father, Constantius, and the ambitious Eastern Caesar. Galerius despises Constantine and his father, seeing them as rivals for ultimate power. Life in the court is a tightrope walk. Constantine has to be strong, intelligent, and charismatic enough to earn respect, but not so much that he appears as a threat. Galerius, it said, repeatedly tried to get rid of him, sending him on the most dangerous missions, hoping he wouldn't come back. But Constantine doesn't just survive, he thrives. He excels as a military officer, earning the love and respect of the soldiers, the same soldiers who would one day be crucial to his ambitions. He learns a vital lesson from the Tetrarchy. Shared power is an illusion. The system, designed to prevent civil war, is filled with men who are just waiting for their chance to seize absolute control. He sees that Diocletian's neat, logical system doesn't account for human ambition, jealousy, and the love a father has for his son. The Tetrarchy was meant to eliminate dynasties, but Constantine is living proof that bloodlines still matter. Then, in 305 AD, the unthinkable happens. Diocletian, in an unprecedented move, voluntarily abdicates. He retires to his magnificent palace and split to grow cabbages, forcing his co-emperor Maximian to do the same. The machine is supposed to click into place. The two Caesars, Galerius and Constantine's father Constantius, are promoted to Augustus. Two new Caesars are appointed. The system should continue, but Galerius, now the senior Augustus, ensures that Constantine is passed over. He is deliberately sidelined, his path to power blocked. A year later, Constantine's father Constantius falls gravely ill. While on campaign in Britain, he knows he is dying. Defying Galerius, he summons his son to his side. Constantine embarks on a desperate high-stakes race across Europe, dodging the traps Galerius has set for him. He reaches his father's deathbed in Ebraca modern day, York just in time. And here, the Tetrarchy's fatal flaw is exposed. On his deathbed, Constantius, surrounded by his loyal legions, does something the system was designed to prevent. He names his own son, Constantine, as his successor. Soldiers who adore the charismatic young commander roar their approval and immediately proclaim him Augustus. This single act shatters Diocletian's carefully constructed machine. It's a direct challenge to the authority of Galerius and the entire tetrarchic system. The other rulers are furious. They didn't choose Constantine. They army did. And just like that, the empire is once again on the path to civil war. Constantine, the boy who grew up as a pawn in a game of four kings, has just knocked over the entire board. He doesn't just want a piece of the empire. He's learned from watching the Tetrarchy that to truly survive, you have to win it all. The era of the four emperors is over, and the age of Constantine is about to begin. Thank you so much for joining me on this chapter of our journey through history. If you're enjoying this series, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel. It truly helps us create more content like this for you. We'll see you next time, as Constantine's rise to power truly ignites. Welcome back to our journey through the life of Constantine the Great. In our last chapter, we saw a young Constantine rising through the military ranks, a brilliant commander marked for greatness. But before he could claim his own empire, he had to navigate one of the most powerful and perilous places in the ancient world. The court of Emperor This is where a soldier would be forged into an emperor. Imagine stepping into the city of Nicomedia, the new capital of the Eastern Roman Empire. This wasn't old Rome. Diocletian had built a metropolis of breathtaking splendor. Streets paved with marble, colossal statues gleaming in the sun, and a palace so vast it was a city in itself. For a young man from the rugged frontiers, this was a world of unimaginable opulence. Constantine entered this world not as a prince, but as a high-ranking officer and, unofficially, a hostage. His father, Constantius, was Caesar in the west, and Constantine's presence in the east was Diocletian's guarantee of his loyalty. Diocletian's court was nothing like the courts of old. The emperor was no longer just the first citizen. He was Dominus, et Deus, Lord and God. Access to him was shrouded in elaborate ceremony. Courtiers wore silk robes of purple and white, prostrating themselves before the emperor who sat on a magnificent throne adorned with jewels. This was a deliberate spectacle, designed to elevate the emperor above mere mortals and stabilize a deeply fractured empire. Constantine, a direct and action-oriented military man, watched all of this. He saw how Diocletian used ritual, grandeur, and an aura of divine authority to command absolute loyalty. This was his first great lesson in the theater of power. He learned that leadership wasn't just about winning battles. It was about crafting an image and commanding respect through sheer presence. Life in the court was a masterclass in politics. Every day was a dance of ambition, flattery, and hidden daggers. Constantine was surrounded by the sharpest minds of the empire generals, administrators, and scholars. He listened, he learned, and he observed the intricate web of alliances and rivalries. He saw how Galerius, the ambitious Caesar of the East, viewed him with suspicion and jealousy. Galerius saw Constantine, not just as the son of another Caesar, but as a potential rival for the ultimate prize. This early tension was a sign of the conflicts to come. Constantine learned to be charismatic but cautious, to build friendships while being aware of his enemies. He developed a keen sense of who to trust and how to read the subtle currents of political favor. While serving under Diocletian and Galerius, Constantine wasn't just a courtier. He was an active military commander. He fought in campaigns along the Danube and in the east against the Sassanid Empire in Persia. On the battlefield, he was in his element. He proved his courage and strategic genius time and again, winning the admiration of his soldiers. They saw in him a leader who fought alongside them, who understood their struggles, and who led from the front. This bond with the army would become his greatest asset, while the politicians in Nicomedia schemed in gilded halls. Constantine was earning the unwavering loyalty of the men who held the true power in the empire, the legions. But this period was also marked by a dark chapter. The Great Persecution, in 303 AD, Diocletian, heavily influenced by Galerius, unleashed the most severe persecution of Christians in Roman history. Churches were burned, scriptures were destroyed, and believers were forced to renounce their faith or face brutal punishment. Constantine was there, at the heart of the imperial court, as these edicts were issued. We don't have his personal diary, but historians believe this experience profoundly affected him. He witnessed the incredible resilience of the Christians, their willingness to face death rather than abandon their God. He saw the futility and brutality of the policy. Did it sow the seeds of his future conversion? Perhaps. At the very least, it was a powerful lesson in the limits of force against faith, a lesson that would shape his own reign in a revolutionary way. The years in Nicomedia were a tightrope walk. Galerius, ever the rival, saw Constantine's growing popularity as a threat. He reportedly tried to dispose of Constantine by sending him on increasingly dangerous missions, hoping a barbarian spear or a Persian arrow would solve his political problem. One famous story tells of Galerius challenging Constantine to fight a lion in an arena. Constantine, of course, not only survived, but triumphed, further cementing his legendary status among the troops. Whether these stories are entirely true or later embellishments, they captured the reality of his situation. He was a golden captive, constantly having to prove his worth while dodging the political machinations of a jealous superior. Then, in 305 AD, the unthinkable happened. Diocletian, in a move unprecedented in Roman history, voluntarily abdicated the throne. He forced his co-emperor Maximian to do the same. The Tetrarchy Diocletian's system of 4 rulers was meant to ensure a smooth transition of power. Galerius and Constantine's father, Constantius, were elevated to the rank of Augustus. But when it came time to appoint the new Caesars, Constantine was deliberately overlooked. Galerius, now the senior emperor, promoted his own loyalists, ensuring he held the real power. For Constantine, this was the ultimate betrayal. He had served loyally, fought bravely, and proven his capability, only to be cast aside. Stuck in Galerius's court, Constantine knew his life was in greater danger than ever. His father, Constantius, now an Augustus in the west, was ailing and repeatedly requested his son's presence. Galerius kept making excuses, holding Constantine as a political pawn. The young man knew he had to escape, or he would likely never leave the East alive. What followed was a daring flight across Europe. A desperate race against time that would change the course of history and set Constantine on the path to his destiny. He was no longer just a soldier or a courtier. He was a claimant to an empire, and his great game for the throne of Rome was about to begin. Thank you for watching. Join us next time as we follow Constantine's desperate ride to his father's side in the dramatic moment in a distant city in Britain where his life and the Roman world would be forever changed. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next chapter in our epic story. We'll see you then. The year is 305 AD. The Roman Empire, vast and sprawling, is ruled by a tetrarchy, a committee of 4 emperors. In the east, Diocletian, the senior Augustus, has just done the unthinkable. He has voluntarily retired, forcing his co-emperor Maximian to do the same. This power vacuum creates a surge of ambition and instability for one young man, a political hostage in the Eastern court. This is the moment he's been waiting for. His name is Constantine. For years, Constantine had been living a gilded cage existence under the watchful eye of the Eastern Emperor. He was the son of Constantius, a respected general who had just been promoted to Augustus, the senior emperor of the West. While Constantine was treated well, everyone knew his true status. He was a guarantee of his father's loyalty. But Constantine was more than just a pawn. He was charismatic, intelligent, and fiercely ambitious. He learned the art of war, politics, and power, all while dreaming of the day he could reunite with his father and claim his own destiny in the West. The new emperor of the East, Galerius, was a harsh and ruthless man who deeply distrusted Constantine. He saw the young man's popularity with the troops and his father's rising power as a direct threat. Constantine repeatedly asked for permission to join his father, who was preparing for a campaign in Britain. Each time, Galerius found a new excuse to refuse. He knew that letting Constantine go meant unleashing a rival he might not be able to control. The tension in the court was palpable. Constantine was walking a tightrope, knowing that one wrong move could mean his end. The situation was becoming desperate. Constantine's father, Constantius, was aging and in poor health. He sent letter after letter to Galerius, pleading for his son's return. Finally, perhaps fearing the political fallout of being seen as the man who kept his son from his dying father, Galerius relented. One evening, he signed the official travel permit, the warrant that would allow Constantine to pass through the imperial post stations. But he handed it to Constantine with a chilling instruction. You may leave, but you must see me in the morning for final instructions before you depart. Constantine knew exactly what that meant. Final instructions was a euphemism. Galerius was stalling. He would find a reason to revoke the permit, or worse, arrange an accident for Constantine on the road. The night was his only window of opportunity. As soon as he had the sealed document in his hand, a daring plan formed in his mind. He couldn't wait for morning. He had to leave. Under the cloak of darkness, Constantine made his move. He feasted and drank with Galerius and his court, putting on a show of cheerful obedience. He made sure everyone saw him retiring to his chambers for the night. But he wasn't going to sleep. This was a calculated performance. Once the palace was quiet, he slipped out. He didn't just escape. He orchestrated a masterpiece of disruption to cover his tracks. His journey would rely on the Cusus Publicus, the state-run relay system of horses. To prevent anyone from following him, he took a radical step. As he rode out of Nicomedia, he ordered the fresh horses at each post station to be brought to him, and for the horses he left behind, he had them hamstrung. It was a brutal, ruthless decision, but it was the only way to ensure he couldn't be caught. He was crippling the Empire's communication and transport network behind him, one station at a time. It was a declaration of intent. He was no longer a hostage, but a contender for power. Imagine the scene. A lone rider, galloping through the night, pushing himself and his mounts to their absolute limit. Each sunrise brought him further west, further from Galerius's grasp. Each sunset brought the fear of pursuit. He rode across Asia Minor, through the Balkans, a desperate, high-stakes race against time and the might of the Eastern Roman Empire. Every stranger on the road was a potential threat, every delay a potential disaster. He was fueled by adrenaline, ambition, and the burning desire to see his father one last time. The next morning in Nicomedia, Galerius awoke to find his prize bird had flown the coop. The rage must have been volcanic. He had been outmaneuvered, made a fool of by the young man he had held captive for years. He immediately dispatched his fastest riders in pursuit, but it was too late. At every post station, they found the same grim scene. Exhausted, useless horses, and the cold trail of a man who was already hundreds of miles ahead. Constantine's calculated cruelty had paid off. He had vanished into the west. After an incredible journey, covering more than 1,600 miles in a matter of weeks, a dust-covered and exhausted Constantine finally arrived at the port of Gesoriacum, modern-day Boulogne, in Gaul. His father, Constantius, was waiting, about to cross the channel to Britain. The reunion was surely emotional. The father, frail and ailing, finally embracing the son he thought he might never see again. The son, no longer a boy but a hardened man, returned from the brink to stand by his father's side. Together, they crossed into Britain and campaigned against the Picts in the north. Constantine quickly proved his military prowess, earning the respect and loyalty of his father's legions. It was a critical time. He wasn't just his father's son anymore. He was a leader in his own right. Just a few months later, in the summer of 306 AD, Constantius died in the city of Eboracum, which we now know as York. With his dying breath, he named Constantine his successor. The soldiers, who already admired the young, dynamic prince, didn't hesitate. They hoisted Constantine on their shields and proclaimed him Augustus, Emperor of the Roman Empire. This act was a direct challenge to Galerius and the entire tetrarchic system. The son of a hostage, who had just escaped the Eastern court, was now claiming the ultimate prize. His mad dash across the empire was more than just an escape. It was the opening move in a game that would reshape the world. The rise of ambition had culminated in a defiant seizure of power, setting the stage for a series of civil wars that would ultimately leave one man standing. Constantine the Great. His journey to freedom was over, but his journey to absolute power had just begun. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this story of ambition and daring as fascinating as I did, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more epic tales from history. We'll see you in the next chapter. Picture this. The year is 306 AD. We're in Eboracum, a rugged, bustling Roman fort on the very edge of the empire. You probably know it better as the city of York in England. The air is thick with grief and uncertainty. Emperor Constantius, a respected leader, as Justiade, his legions, thousands of soldiers far from home, are now without their commander-in-chief. What happens next? Who will lead them? Who will protect the frontiers of Britannia from the Picts lurking just beyond the wall? In the Roman system, the line of succession was a messy affair. Power wasn't always inherited. It was often taken. The official heir, the new Augustus in the east, Galerius, had his own plans. He had two Caesars, Severus and Maximinus Daia, ready to step up. Constantius' son, a young, ambitious man named Constantine, was not part of that plan. In fact, he was practically a hostage in Galerius' court, a political pawn to ensure his father's loyalty. But Constantine was his father's sunbolt, charismatic, and not one to sit by and let fate decide for him. Just before his father's final campaign, Constantine made a daring escape from Galerius' court, riding day and night across Europe, allegedly laming the post horses behind him to prevent pursuit. He arrived in Eboracum just in time to be at his father's side when he passed away. For the soldiers, this was a sign. They had served Constantius faithfully. They had seen his son fight alongside them. They knew his character. They weren't about to accept some stranger appointed from a palace hundreds of miles away. So, on July 25th, 306 AD, in a moment that would change the course of history, the army of Britannia did something extraordinary. They ignored the official line of succession. In the courtyard of the Praetorium, the commander's headquarters, They raised Constantine up on a shield, the traditional declaration of a new emperor. Chants of Augustus echoed off the stone walls. In that moment, loyalty to their fallen general and his son overruled the complex politics of the Tetrarchy. It was a military acclamation, a raw and powerful expression of the army's will. You can imagine the scene. The grizzled legionaries, men who had marched and fought under Constantius, now looked to his son with hope. Constantine was young, just in his early 30s, but he had a commanding presence. He accepted the purple robe, the symbol of imperial power, not with arrogance, but with a calculated show of reluctance. He knew this was a dangerous move. Declaring himself emperor was an act of rebellion. It was a direct challenge to Galerius, the most powerful man in the Roman world. Constantine immediately sent a message to Galerius. It was a masterclass in diplomacy and veiled threat. He sent a portrait of himself, adorned not with the full laurel wreath of an Augustus, but with the bay leaves of a Caesar. The message was clear. My father's army has made me their leader. I didn't seek this. It was thrust upon me. Batteriam recognized me as a junior partner, and we can avoid bloodshed. Refuse, and you'll have a war on your hands. Galerius was furious. His whole system of orderly succession was crumbling. He reportedly almost threw the portrait into the fire. But his advisors calmed him. Fighting a civil war in distant Britannia was risky and expensive. The troops there were loyal to Constantine. A long, drawn-out conflict would weaken the empire's borders everywhere else. So, reluctantly, Galerius compromised. He refused to grant Constantine the title of Augustus, instead promoting the official heir, Severus, to that rank. But he offered Constantine the junior title of Caesar. For Constantine, this was a victory. He had a foothold. He was officially part of the imperial college. He had a territory to govern Britannia, and Goland, an army that adored him. From his new base in Trier, he spent the next few years proving himself a worthy ruler. He secured the Rhine frontier, fighting off Germanic tribes and earning a reputation as a brilliant military commander. He governed his provinces justly, building infrastructure and earning the loyalty of the people, not just the soldiers. This event in York was the first domino to fall in the collapse of the Tetrarchy. Constantine's audacious claim to power inspired another. In Rome, Maxentius, the son of the retired Emperor Maximian, saw his chance. If Constantine could do it, why couldn't he? The citizens of Rome were unhappy with the new tax policies imposed by Severus and Galerius. They rose up and proclaimed Maxentius their emperor. Suddenly, the neat system of 4 rulers was a chaotic mess of 6 claimants, all vying for power. The years that followed were a brutal and complex series of civil wars. Emperors were made and unmade, alliances were forged and broken, and battles raged from Britain to the Middle East. But it all started in that one moment of decision in Eber. The loyalty of a few legions to their general's son lit a fire that would consume the old Roman world. Constantine's rise wasn't just about personal ambition. It represented a shift in the nature of Roman power. It showed that the will of the frontier armies could be more powerful than the decrees of a distant court. It demonstrated that a charismatic leader with a loyal following could carve his own path, defying the established order. This young man, proclaimed emperor in a remote northern province, was now on a trajectory that would lead him to the Milvian Bridge, to the Edict of Milan, and to the founding of a new capital, Constantinople. He would not just reunite the Roman Empire under his sole rule. He would set it on a completely new course, paving the way for the Christian Roman Empire of the Middle Ages. And to think, it all began with the cheers of soldiers in a Roman fort in what is now the heart of Yorkshire, England. A moment of loyalty and uncertainty that forever altered the destiny of Western civilization. The world we live in today was shaped by that fateful day in York. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back in time. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and consider subscribing for more deep dives into the pivotal moments of history. Let me know in the comments what you think about Constantine's daring move. Until next time, stay curious. Welcome back to our series on the life of Constantine the Great. When we last left off, the carefully constructed tetrarchy of Diocletian was beginning to crumble. Following the abdication of Diocletian and Maximian, the system designed to ensure a peaceful transfer of power was about to be tested and it would fail spectacularly. The stage was set for one of the most chaotic and transformative periods in Roman history. A massive, empire-spanning civil war. In 306, upon the death of his father Constantine was proclaimed Augustus by his troops in Eboracum, modern-day York, England. This was a direct challenge to the established order. The legitimate senior emperor, Galerius, was furious. He refused to recognize Constantine as Augustus, but, in a reluctant compromise, granted him the lesser title of Caesar. This was the first crack in the dam. Meanwhile, in Rome, another rebellion was brewing. The people of Rome and the Praetorian Guard were deeply unhappy with the new tax policies and the city's diminished status. They turned to Maxentius, the son of the former emperor Maximian, and proclaimed him emperor. Suddenly, the empire had more rulers than the tetrarchy system allowed for. Maximian himself even came out of retirement to support his son, reclaiming his old title of Augustus. The situation was spiraling out of control. So, let's take a quick head count. We have Galerius and Severus as the legitimate Augusti, Constantine as a recognized Caesar, and Maxentius as a usurper in Rome, supported by his father Maxine. Constantine, from his base in Gaul and Britain, watched all of this unfold with incredible patience. That's a lot of ambitious men sharing a very crowded stage. It was a powder keg waiting for a spark. He could have marched on Rome immediately, but he chose a different path. He was a master of strategic patience. He knew his position was precarious. He needed to consolidate his power in his own territories first, securing the loyalty of his legions and the stability of the Rhine frontier. He spent these early years governing his provinces effectively, fighting off Germanic tribes, and building a reputation as a capable and just ruler. He was playing the long game. His diplomacy was just as crucial as his military strength. He formed a strategic alliance with the old Emperor Maximian, who traveled to Constantine's court in Trier. To seal the deal, Constantine married Maximian's daughter, Faustina. This move gave Constantine a crucial link to the old Herculean dynasty of the Tetrarchy, lending him a legitimacy that Galerius couldn't easily dismiss. He was now family. But in the tangled web of Roman politics, family ties were just as likely to be a weapon as a bond. The situation grew even more complex. Galerius sent his co-emperor Severus to deal with Maxentius in Italy, but the campaign was a disaster. Severus's army, many of whom had served under Maxentius's father, deserted him. Severus was captured and later executed. In response, Galerius himself marched on Italy, but he too was forced to retreat. The Tetrarchy was in shambles. In 308, an imperial conference was held at Carnuntum on the Danube, in an attempt to sort out the mess. Diocletian himself was coaxed out of retirement to oversee it. The result, Maxentius was declared a public enemy. A new Augustus, Licinius, was appointed to govern the West, even though he controlled no Western territory. And Constantine was officially demoted back to Caesar. Did Constantine accept this? Absolutely not. He and another claimant, Maximinus Daia in the East, both rejected their demotion and demanded the title of Augustus. By 310, Galerius had no choice but to concede. The empire now had 4 official Augusti: Galerius, Licinius, Maximinus, Daia, and Constantine. And let's not forget the usurper Maxentius, still firmly in control of Italy and Africa. The dream of a stable, 4-man rule was dead. It was now a free. Even Constantine's alliance with his father-in-law Maximian imploded. The old emperor tried to usurp Constantine's power while he was away on campaign. The plot failed, and Constantine forced Maximian to take his own life. This was a ruthless but necessary move. It demonstrated that Constantine would not tolerate any challenge to his authority, no matter the source. It also freed him from a complicated and unreliable ally. For years, Constantine focused on his own domain. He secured the Rhine frontier, built up a formidable, battle-hardened army, and filled his treasury. He was preparing. While his rivals schemed and fought amongst themselves, Constantine was building a power base that was second to none. He wasn't just waiting for an opportunity. He was actively creating the conditions for his future success. His patience was not passive. It was predatory. The death of Galerius from a horrific disease in 311 created a new power vacuum. The remaining contenders began to circle each other. Licinius and Constantine strengthened their alliance, while Maxentius and Maximinus Daia formed their own pact. The empire was now effectively split into two major factions, poised on the brink of a decisive conflict. Finally, in 312, Constantine decided the time was right. After years of careful preparation, diplomacy, and consolidation, he made his move. He gathered his legions and, in a daring gamble, crossed the Alps into Italy to confront Maxentius. This wasn't a rash decision. It was the calculated culmination of 6 years of strategic patience. He was no longer just the boy emperor from Britain. He was a seasoned commander and a cunning political operator, ready to stake his claim on the ultimate prize. The road from York to Rome was long and treacherous, filled with political maneuvering, shifting alliances, and brutal betrayals. Constantine navigated it all with a remarkable combination of military skill, diplomatic finesse, and cold-blooded resolve. He outlasted, outmaneuvered, and outfought his rivals one by one. This period of civil war reveals the core of Constantine's character. He wasn't just a great general. He was a brilliant strategist who understood that power wasn't simply taken on the battlefield. It was built carefully, piece by piece, through governance, diplomacy, and, above all, timing. He knew when to wait and when to strike. And it was that decisive strike into Italy that would lead to one of the most pivotal moments in Western history. The Battle of the Milvian Bridge and Constantinus' legendary vision of the cross. But that is a story for our next chapter. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through a complex and chaotic chapter of Roman history. It really shows how a single, determined individual can navigate a crisis and rise to the top. If you enjoyed this video and want to see what happens next, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss an episode. We'll see you next time. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our journey through the annals of history. Today, we're diving into a moment so profound, so pivotal, that it didn't just change the course of a battle. It altered the destiny of Western civilization itself. We're talking about the night before the Battle of the Milvian Bridge in 312 AD, and a vision that would echo through eternity. Imagine this. The Roman Empire is fractured, torn apart by a civil war known as the Tetrarchy. For emperors vie for control, but the main event is a showdown between two ambitious men, Constantine and Maxentius. Constantine, commanding his legions from Gaul and Britain, has marched his army all the way down the Italian peninsula. He's an underdog, outnumbered and far from his supply lines. In his path stands Rome, the heart of the empire, defended by his rival, Maxentius, who commands a larger, well-supplied force, including the elite Praetorian Guard. The stakes couldn't be higher. For Constantine, defeat means not just the end of his ambition, but almost certainly his life. The pressure is immense. His soldiers are weary from the long march, and now they face a superior enemy defending the most formidable city in the world. Morale is a fragile thing, and as the sun sets on October 27th, the eve of the battle, a heavy sense of uncertainty hangs in the air. Constantine, like any great commander, knows that the battle will be won or lost not just by swords and shields, but in the hearts and minds of his men. This is where our story takes a turn from a typical historical account to something legendary. As Constantine contemplated his seemingly insurmountable odds, something extraordinary happened. According to historical sources, particularly the writer Lactantius, Constantine had a dream. In T's dream, he was commanded to mark the shields of his soldiers with a heavenly sign of God. But it's the account of another historian, Eusebius of Caesarea, who wrote after Constantine's death, but claimed to have heard the story from the emperor himself, that gives us the most iconic version. According to Eusebius, it wasn't just a dream. In the afternoon, as the sun began to lower, Constantine and his entire army looked up at the sky. There, above the sun, they saw a trophy of a cross, fashioned from light, and emblazoned upon it were the Greek words, which translates to the famous Latin phrase we know today, In hoc signo vinces. In this sign, you will conquer. Can you imagine the awe, The shock, the sheer power of that moment. An entire army witnessing a celestial sign. It was a message of divine assurance, a promise of victory against all odds. That night, the vision was reinforced. Christ is said to have appeared to Constantine in a dream, holding the same sign he had seen in the heavens, and commanded him to make a replica of it, to be used as a standard in battle. This standard became known as the Laborum. It was a long spear with a transverse bar, forming a cross, with a banner of purple and gold cloth hanging from it. At the very top, an emblem was created by superimposing the first two Greek letters of Christ's name, GX and Rho P. This symbol, the Chiro, was what Constantine ordered to be painted on every soldier's shield. Think about the psychological impact. Before this, Constantine, like most Romans, was a follower of Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun. But this vision was something different. It was a direct, personal, and powerful intervention. For his soldiers, many of whom were from the sun-worshipping or pagan traditions of Gaul and Britain, this was a moment of profound transformation. Their general, their leader, had been chosen by a new, powerful god. They weren't just fighting for an emperor anymore. They were fighting under a divine banner. Their cause was now a holy one. The next day, October 28th, the armies met at the Milvian Bridge, a key crossing over the Tiber River into Rome. Maxentus, against the advice of his counselors, chose to leave the safety of Rome's walls and meet Constantine in open battle. It was a fatal error. Fired up with a newfound divine purpose, Constantine's smaller army fought with incredible ferocity. They were no longer the underdogs. They were agents of destiny. The battle turned into a rout. Maxentus's forces broke and fled back towards the city, creating a chaotic bottleneck at the bridge. In the panic, the temporary pontoon bridge they had built collapsed. Maxentus, weighed down by his own armor, was thrown into the Tiber and drowned along with thousands of his men. Constantine had won. He marched into Rome not just as a conqueror, but as a liberator, hailed by its people. But the victory was more than just military. The vision of the cross and the subsequent triumph at the Milvian Bridge marked a turning point for Constantine, personally and for the entire Roman Empire. He became the sole ruler of the Western Roman Empire, and his victory was attributed directly to the power of the Christian God. This event set in motion a chain of events that would lead to the Edict of Milan in 338, which granted religious tolerance throughout the empire and ended the persecution of Christians. From a persecuted minority, Christians suddenly found their faith championed by the most powerful man in the world. The vision before the battle wasn't just a good luck charm. It was the catalyst that would fuse the power of the Roman state with the burgeoning Christian faith. This synthesis would lay the foundation for the next 1,000 years of European history, shaping its art, its politics, its culture, and its very soul. The cross, once a symbol of a criminal's execution, was now a symbol of imperial power and divine victory. And it all started on that one fateful evening, with a commander staring at the setting sun, looking for a sign, and receiving a vision that would not only win him a battle, but would forever change the world. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the most important battles are won before a single sword is even drawn. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into one of history's most defining moments. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe for more chapters from our shared past. We'd love to have you in our community. Until next time, stay curious. The year is 312 AD. The fate of the Roman Empire hangs precariously in the balance, a colossal prize to be won or lost in a single day. Outside the ancient walls of Rome, two armies, two emperors, and two futures are about to collide. This is the story of the Battle of the Milvian Bridge. As dawn breaks on October 28th, a heavy, ghostly mist blankets the Tiber River. It clings to the reeds along the banks and swirls around the stone arches of the bridge, muffling the world in a quiet shroud. On the north side, the legions of Constantine are stirring. You can hear the low, metallic clatter of armor being buckled, the soft thud of leather boots on damp earth, and the nervous snorts of war horses, their breath pluming in the chilly air. These are veteran soldiers, hardened by campaigns in Gaul and Britain. But today, an unfamiliar tension hangs over them. They are outnumbered. far from home, and about to face the elite Praetorian Guard, the personal protectors of the emperor in Rome. Their leader, Constantine, walks among them. He is not just a general today. He is a man touched by a vision the night before, under a sky full of stars. He had seen something extraordinary, a sign in the heavens, a cross of light, and heard a promise. In this sign you shall conquer. He ordered his soldiers to paint this new symbol, the Chiro, onto their shields. For many, it was a strange, foreign emblem. But they obeyed their commander. Their loyalty to him was absolute, a bond forged in the fires of a dozen campaigns. They trusted his leadership, even when it led them into the heart of his rival's territory. Across the river, within the Aurelian walls, the mood is one of overconfident dismissal. The Emperor Maxentius, who holds Rome, has consulted his own oracles. The Sibylline books, ancient prophetic texts, had told him that on this day, the enemy of Rome would perish. Maxentius, smug and secure, interpreted this to mean Constantine. Why should he fear? He had the city's formidable defenses, a larger army, and the unwavering support of the Praetorian Guard. His supply lines were short, while Constantine's were stretched thin across Italy. Logic, numbers, and prophecy all seemed to be on his side. Yet, in a fateful decision that historians still debate, Maxentius chose not to wait for a siege, perhaps driven by arrogance, or perhaps fearing a Roman populace weary of his rule might turn against him. He decides to march his army out of the city and meet Constantine in open battle. His engineers had constructed a temporary bridge of boats next to the stone Milvian Bridge, a clever trap designed to be collapsed if his forces needed to retreat. He was setting a snare, but in doing so, he was also leaving the safety of his fortress. As the sun climbs higher, burning away the mist, the two armies come into view of each other. The Tiber flows between them, a silver ribbon dividing two worlds. The soldiers of Maxentius, arrayed in magnificent armor, their banners snapping in the breeze, look like an invincible force. The Praetorians, in their ornate helmets and gleaming breastplates, stand as the proud centerpiece. The quiet of the morning is shattered by the deep, guttural blast of Roman hornzerk. The sound echoes across the valley, a declaration of war. Constantine's cavalry, his most effective weapon, are the first to move. They surge forward on the flanks, a wave of men and horses, their decorated shields flashing in the sunlight. Their charge is disciplined, relentless, aimed at disrupting the enemy lines before the infantry even clashes. The battle erupts into a chaotic symphony of violence, the crash of shield against shield, the shriek of metal on metal, the desperate cries of men. The fighting is brutal and close-quartered. Constantine's veterans, though outnumbered, fight with a fierce desperation. They are a cohesive unit, while the army of Maxentius, a mix of Praetorians and less experienced troops, begins to show cracks. Constantine is not a general who commands from the rear. He is in the thick of the fight, a visible beacon for his men. His helmet glints as he weaves through the melee, his presence a source of immense courage for his soldiers. They see their emperor fighting alongside them, sharing their risk, and they fight all the harder. His cavalry smashes into the flanks of Maxentius's army, folding the lines inward. Panic begins to ripple through the ranks. The less seasoned troops, seeing the Praetorians struggling against the onslaught, start to break. The retreat begins as a trickle, then becomes a flood. Maxentius's men turn and run for the safety of the bridges, but the narrow crossing points become a bottleneck of terror. Men are pushed, trampled, and shoved into the cold, churning waters of the Tiber. The scene on the riverbank is one of utter chaos. Maxentius, seeing his army disintegrate, is swept up in the frantic retreat. He makes for the bridge of boats, the very trap he had set for his enemy. But in the crush of panicked soldiers, the pontoon bridge gives way. Under the weight of so many men and horses, the structure collapses, plunging hundreds into the river. Among them is the Emperor Maxentius himself. Weighed down by his heavy armor, he is pulled under the surface. The Tiber, which he had intended to be his line of defense, becomes his tomb. The prophecy was fulfilled. The enemy of Rome had indeed perished. It was just not the one he expected. As the last pockets of resistance are cleared, a strange quiet falls over the battlefield. The groans of the wounded replace the clash of swords. Constantine's soldiers, exhausted and bloodied, look upon the scene. They have achieved the impossible. Their victory is total, absolute. Next day. The next day, the body of Maxentis is dragged from the river, and his head is paraded on a spear. A grim confirmation of Constantine's triumph. Constantine's entry into Rome was not as a conqueror, but as a liberator. The city, which had feared a sack, welcomed him with relief. But this victory was more than just a change of ruler. It was a pivotal moment that would alter the course of Western civilization forever. The sign Constantine saw in the sky, the symbol his soldiers carried into battle, would soon be seen across the entire empire. This victory at the Milvian Bridge was the first step in the transformation of Christianity from a persecuted sect into the dominant religion of the Western world. History is not just a series of events. It is a chain of moments, of decisions, and turning points that echo through centuries. And on that misty October day, by the waters of the Tiber, a single battle did not just determine who would rule Rome. It shaped the spiritual destiny of a continent and laid the foundations for the world we know today. Thank you for joining us on this journey back in time. If you found this story as fascinating as we do, please hit that like button, subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into history, and ring that notification bell so you never miss an episode. We'll see you next time. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our historical journey. Today, we're diving into a moment that didn't just change an empire, but reshaped the course of world history. We're talking about the rise of Christianity within the Roman Empire. A story centered around one of its most pivotal figures, Emperor Constantine. Imagine the scene. It's the year 312. AD, the Roman Empire is fractured, torn apart by civil wars. Constantine is marching towards Rome to face his rival, Maxentis, at the Milvian Bridge. The odds are against him. But then something extraordinary happens. According to historical accounts, Constantine looks up to the sun and sees a cross of light above it, accompanied by the Greek words in this sign, "You shall conquer." That night, Constantine dreams that Christ appears to him, instructing him to use this sign as a safeguard in all his battles. He orders his soldiers to paint the Chiro, a Christian symbol, on their shields. And what happens next is the stuff of legend. Against all expectations, Constantine's forces are victorious. Maxentis is defeated, and Constantine marches into Rome as the undisputed ruler of the Western Roman Empire. For Constantine, this was no mere coincidence or military tactic. He was utterly convinced that his victory was a divine miracle, granted by the God of the Christians. This profound personal experience would set in motion a chain of events that would alter the spiritual landscape of the Western world forever. Constantine's victory wasn't just a political win, it was the catalyst for a religious revolution. The following year, 313 is a date every history enthusiast should know. Constantine, now in a position of immense power, met with Licinius, the emperor of the eastern part of the empire, in the city of Milan. Together, they issued a proclamation that would become known as the Edict of Milan. This wasn't just another piece of imperial legislation. It was a groundbreaking declaration of religious freedom. Let's pause and consider how radical this was. For centuries, Christians in the Roman Empire had faced sporadic, and sometimes brutal, persecution. They were seen as a strange, secretive sect that refused to worship the traditional Roman gods and the emperor. Under emperors like Nero and Diocletian, they were arrested, tortured, and executed in horrific ways. Their faith was an underground movement, practiced in whispers and hidden catacombs. The Edict of Milan changed everything. Let me read you a key part of it. It states that it was proper that the Christians and all others should have liberty to follow that mode of religion, which to each of them appeared best. This wasn't just about tolerating Christianity. It was about granting freedom of worship to everyone. It declared, officially, that people could worship whichever deity they chose, without fear of punishment from the state. Furthermore, the edict went a step further. It ordered that all property that had been confiscated from Christians, cemeteries, and other assets be returned to them immediately and without charge. This was a massive act of restitution. It was the empire formally acknowledging the injustices of the past and seeking to right those wrongs. It was a signal that Christians were no longer outcasts, but recognized members of the Roman world. So, what were the immediate effects of this edict? First and foremost, it was a huge sigh of relief for Christian communities across the empire. The age of martyrs was over. They could now worship openly, build churches, and organize their communities without hiding. This newfound security led to an explosion in the growth of the faith. Constantine didn't just stop at the edict. His patronage of the church was immense. He poured imperial funds into building magnificent like the original St. Peter's Basilica in Rome and the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. He elevated bishops to positions of honor, granting them the same status as high-ranking civil servants. He even moved the capital of the empire to a new city, Constantinople, which he envisioned as a new Rome, a Christian capital, free from the pagan traditions of the old city. It is important to understand that the Edict of Milan did not make Christianity the official state religion of the Roman Empire. That wouldn't happen until later, under Emperor Theodosius, in 380 AD, however. The edict marked the definitive turning point. It was the moment the tide shifted irrevocably. The power and prestige of the emperor were now aligned with the church. This alliance between throne and altar had profound consequences, both positive and negative, that would echo for centuries. On one hand, it allowed Christianity to flourish and spread like never before, shaping law, philosophy, art, and culture. The organizational structure of the Roman Empire even provided a blueprint for the administrative structure of the church. On the other hand, this new partnership brought new challenges. The church became entangled in politics. Theological disputes, which were once internal debates, could now become matters of state, sometimes leading to imperial intervention. The line between religious authority and political power began to blur, setting the stage for the complex relationship between church and state that would define the Middle Ages and beyond. Constantine's conversion and the Edict of Milan essentially laid the foundation for Christendom. An empire that once sought to extinguish Christianity became its greatest champion. From being a persecuted minority, Christians were now on the path to becoming the dominant religious force in Europe. The dawn of a Christian empire had arrived. This incredible transformation, sparked by a vision of a cross in the sky and solidified by an edict of tolerance, is a powerful testament to how a single leader's conviction can redirect the river of history. The world we live in today is, in many ways, a direct result of the decisions made by Constantine in the wake of his victory at the Milvian Bridge. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into one of history's most significant moments. The story of Constantine and the Edict of Milan is a fascinating chapter in the human story of faith, power, and change. If you enjoyed this video and want to learn more, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss our next historical adventure. We'll see you in the next one. In the grand saga of Rome's transformation, one figure stands out, not for her military might or political maneuvering, but for her profound faith and unwavering devotion. This is the story of Empress Helena, the mother of Constantine the Great, a woman whose journey would not only change her own life, but would also forever shape the landscape of Christianity. Who was this remarkable woman? Born around the year 248, Flavia Julia Helena's origins are humble, a stark contrast to the imperial splendor she would later inhabit. Many historians believe she was an innkeeper's daughter from the Greek city of Drepanum. In Bithynia, it was here, in the bustling eastern provinces of the Roman Empire, that she met a promising Roman officer named Constantine. Their union, whether a formal marriage or a long-term partnership, produced a son who would alter the course of history, Constantine. For years, Helena lived a relatively quiet life, but in 293, her world was turned upside down. To secure a politically advantageous marriage, Constantius divorced her to marry Theodora, the stepdaughter of Emperor Maximian. Suddenly, Helena and her young son Constantine were cast aside, living in the shadows of the imperial court. It must have been a difficult, uncertain time. Yet, she persevered, instilling in her son the resilience and ambition that would later define his reign. Her fortunes changed dramatically when Constantine, after his father's death, was proclaimed emperor by his troops in 300. One of his first acts was to bring his mother back from obscurity. He summoned her to his court, bestowing upon her the title of Augusta, or Empress. After decades of being sidelined, Helena was now one of the most powerful women in the Roman world. She had access to the imperial treasury and wielded immense influence, not through political intrigue, but through her growing Christian faith. It was around this time, likely influenced by her son's conversion, that Helena embraced Christianity herself. She didn't just adopt the faith, she became one of its most passionate and devoted patrons. She used her newfound status and wealth to fund the construction of magnificent churches across the empire, from Rome to the distant eastern provinces. But her greatest work, her defining legacy, was yet to come. In the year 326, at an age when most would be content with a quiet retirement, she was nearly 80 years old. Helena embarked on an extraordinary journey. With the full backing of her son, the emperor, she set out on a pilgrimage to the Holy Land, to the very places where Jesus had lived, preached, and died. This was no simple trip. It was a massive, state-sponsored expedition with a sacred purpose: to uncover and preserve the most holy sites of Christianity. Her arrival in Judea, now renamed Syria Palestina, was a momentous event. She wasn't just a pilgrim, she was the Empress Mother, and her mission was to honor God. She traveled with an entourage of clerics, soldiers, and workers, her mind set on identifying the locations from the Gospels, which had been obscured by time and in some cases intentionally built over by previous Roman emperors, hostile to Christianity. Her first major project was in Bethlehem, the birthplace of Jesus. There, she commissioned the construction of the magnificent Church of the Nativity, over the grotto believed to be the site of Christ's birth. She also ordered a church built on the Mount of Olives, the Church of the Eleona, commemorating the site of the Ascension. These were not just buildings, they were powerful statements, reclaiming sacred ground and establishing permanent Christian landmarks for all future generations of pilgrims. But Helena's most legendary quest was the search for the true cross, the very cross upon which Jesus was crucified. The site of the crucifixion, Golgotha, had been buried under a temple dedicated to the Roman goddess Venus, built by Emperor Hadrian over a century earlier. According to historical accounts, Helena ordered the pagan temple to be torn down and the earth beneath it excavated. The scene must have been incredible. Under the watchful eye of the elderly empress, workers dug deep into the soil. As the story goes, they unearthed not one, but 3 crosses, those of Jesus, and the 2 thieves crucified alongside him. But which was the true cross? A miracle was needed for identification. According to the traditional account, Macarius, the bishop of Jerusalem, brought a terminally ill woman to the site. She touched the first 2 crosses with no effect, but when she touched the 3rd, she was instantly healed. This was the sign they had been waiting for. Helena had found the true cross. The discovery sent shockwaves through the Christian world. It was a tangible link to the central event of their faith. Helena, in her devotion, had provided believers with the ultimate relic. She had a portion of the cross sent back to Constantinople, while the rest remained in Jerusalem, encased in a silver relic, where it became the most venerated object in Christendom. She also is said to have found the nails of the crucifixion and the holy tunic. The culmination of her work in Jerusalem was the construction of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. This monumental basilica, commissioned by Constantine at his mother's behest, encompassed both the site of the crucifixion and the tomb where Jesus was buried and resurrected. It remains to this day the most sacred site in Christianity, a testament to the faith and determination of an elderly empress. Helena returned from her pilgrimage, a celebrated hero of the faith. She passed away shortly after, around the year 330, with her beloved son, Constantine, at her side. But her legacy was just beginning. She was canonized as a saint, revered in both the Eastern and Western churches. Her story, particularly the discovery of the true cross, became a cornerstone of Christian tradition, inspiring art, literature, and countless pilgrimages for centuries to come. From a humble innkeeper's daughter to the revered Empress St. Helena, her life is a powerful story of faith, perseverance, and divine purpose. Her journey to the Holy Land did more than just uncover relics. It physically and spiritually mapped out the Christian faith onto the landscape of its origin, creating enduring places of worship and devotion that continued to inspire millions. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey into the past. If you found this story as inspiring as we do, please hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into history. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our journey through history. Last time, we witnessed Constantine's rise to power, a story of ambition, battles, and a vision that would change the course of an empire. But a new era requires a new heart, a new center of gravity. For Constantine, the old capital, Rome, was steeped in a pagan past. He was determined to move beyond. He dreamed of something grander, a city that would not only rival Rome, but surpass it in every way. This wasn't just about building a new administrative hub. It was about creating a symbol for a new Christian empire. Imagine standing with Constantine, surveying the vast landscapes of his domain. Where would you build the capital of the world? He considered several locations. There was his birthplace, Nisus, and even the legendary city of Troy, steeped in myth and history. But his gaze kept returning to one strategic point, a place that straddled two continents, a natural crossroads of the world. This was the ancient Greek city of Byzantium, perched on the glittering shores of the Bosporus Strait. Why Byzantium? The location was a stroke of genius. Geographically, it was a fortress, guarded by water on three sides. The Golden Horn to the north, the Bosporus to the east, and the Sea of Marmara to the south. It was incredibly easy to defend. A single wall on its western landward side was all that was needed to make it nearly impregnable. For an empire that had been plagued by invasions and civil wars, this security was paramount. Economically, it was a goldmine. The Bosporus is the only waterway connecting the Black Sea to the Mediterranean. Any ship, any trader, any piece of merchandise moving between Europe and Asia, between the grain-rich fields of the north and the wealthy markets of the south, had to pass right by its harbors. By controlling this choke point, the emperor could control the flow of trade and wealth like never before. It was a customs gate for the entire known world. Constantine envisioned a bustling metropolis, a hub where silks from the east met timber from the north, and where cultures and ideas would mingle and flourish. But for Constantine, this city was more than just a fortress or a marketplace. It was to be a statement of faith. He saw it as a Nova Roma, a new Rome, but one consecrated not to the old gods of the pantheon, but to the God of the Christians. This was his divine purpose. He believed he was guided by God to build this city, a shining beacon of the new faith that would illuminate the world. The old Rome was filled with temples to Jupiter, Mars, and Venus. This new Rome would be filled with magnificent churches, its very foundations blessed and dedicated to a Christian future. On a specific day, in November of 324 AD, the story goes that Constantine himself, spear in hand, walked the perimeter of his future capital, tracing the line of its new walls. When his courtiers, astonished by the vast area he was enclosing, asked how much further he would go, he replied, "I shall continue until he who goes before me stops." For Constantine, this was a sacred act, a partnership with the divine. He wasn't just a builder. He was an instrument of God's will, laying the groundwork for a city destined for greatness. And so, the work began on an unprecedented scale. Thousands of workers, artisans, and engineers were brought in from all corners of the empire. Marble was quarried from distant islands. Columns and statues were borrowed from ancient temples in Greece, Egypt, and Asia Minor, and repurposed to adorn this new capital. Constantine was in a hurry. He poured immense resources into the project, determined to see his vision realized within his lifetime. He wanted to create an instant metropolis that felt like it had been there for centuries. He laid out wide, colonnaded streets, forums, public baths, a hippodrome for chariot races that would rival Rome's Circus Maximus, and of course a grand imperial palace. But at the heart of it all were the churches, the Church of the Holy Apostles, the Church of Holy Peace, and later, the first iteration of the Hagia Sophia, the Church of Holy Wisdom. These were not just places of worship. They were imperial statements, symbols of the fusion of church and state that would define the Byzantine Empire. To populate his new city, Constantine offered incredible incentives: free land, tax exemptions, and even a daily ration of free bread for new citizens. He essentially moved the Roman aristocracy, senators and all, eastward, compelling them to build palaces in a new capital. He was transplanting the soul of Rome to the shores of the Bosphorus. In less than 6 years, an astonishing transformation occurred. The modest town of Byzantium was reborn into a magnificent, sprawling city. On May 11th, 330 AD, the city was formally consecrated. The celebrations lasted for 40 days, a mix of Christian ceremony and traditional Roman pageantry. It was officially named Nova Roma, but it quickly became known by the name we remember it by today: Constantinople, the city of Constantine. This wasn't just the founding of a city, it was the beginning of a new chapter in world history. Constantinople would stand for over 1,000 years as the capital of the Eastern Roman, or Byzantine, Empire. It would be the largest and wealthiest city in Europe, a bastion of civilization that preserved the knowledge of the ancient world through the dark ages. It was the queen of cities, a place of wonder, faith, and power. The legacy of Constantine's dream is staggering. While the Western Roman Empire would eventually crumble, this eastern capital would thrive, becoming a vibrant center of art, learning, and Orthodox Christianity. Its massive walls would repel countless invaders, and its influence would stretch far and wide. The decision to build a new capital on the Bosporus was one of the most consequential in history, shaping the political, religious, and cultural map of the world for a millennium. And it all started with one man's vision. A dream of a shining city on a hill, a fortress of faith, a crossroads of the world, a new Rome that would outlive the old. Thank you so much for joining me on this exploration of Constantinople's founding. It's a truly epic story, and we've only just scratched the surface. If you enjoyed this video and want to continue our journey through history, please hit that like button. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you won't miss our next chapter. We love hearing from you, so please leave your thoughts and questions in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious. Welcome, history enthusiasts, to our journey back in time. Today, we're not just visiting a city, we are witnessing its birth. We stand on the cusp of a new era in the year 324 AD, as Emperor Constantine the Great lays the foundation for a new Rome, a city destined to echo through eternity. Constantinople. Imagine the scene. The ancient city of Byzantium, a strategic but modest town, is about to undergo a transformation of epic proportions. Constantine, having consolidated his power over the entire Roman Empire, chooses this very spot, this bridge between Europe and Asia, to build his new capital. His vision is not merely to build a city, but to forge a bastion of Roman power, culture, and faith that will stand for 1,000 years. This is the story of how a dream of marble and gold rose from the earth. The first order of business. Defense. A city, no matter how grand, is nothing without security. So, Constantine orders the construction of a new line of massive walls, stretching from the Golden Horn to the Sea of Marmara. Picture thousands of workers quarrying stone, mixing mortar, and hoisting massive blocks into place. The air is thick with the dust of creation and the rhythmic clang of hammers on stone. These aren't just walls. They're a statement. They declare to the world that this new city, this Constantinople, is to stay. They are the strong arms that will protect the heart of the new empire. At the very heart of this burgeoning metropolis, a grand public space begins to take shape. The Forum of Constantine. This isn't just a marketplace. It's the civic soul of the city. A magnificent oval plaza, paved with pristine marble, is laid out. Around its perimeter, elegant colonnades rise, promising shade and a place for citizens to gather, debate, and conduct business. In the center, a monumental column is erected, soaring towards the heavens. Crafted from porphyry, the imperial purple stone, it is a symbol of the emperor's divine authority. On each summit, a colossal statue of Constantine himself, depicted as the sun god Apollo, will soon gaze over his creation. Can you hear it? The murmur of architects discussing blueprints, the creak of wooden cranes lifting statues into place, the vibrant hum of a city center coming to life. But Constantine's vision extends beyond civic and military might. He is building a Christian capital just a short distance from the new Forum. The foundations are laid for a great church, one that will stand as a testament to the empire's new faith. This is the Hagia Irian, the Church of the Holy Peace, while not as famous as its later sister, the Hagia Sophia. This basilica is a pioneering work of Christian architecture. Imagine the vast interior taking form. Rows of majestic columns create a forest of stone, leading the eye towards the apse where the sacred rites will be performed. Masons carefully lay intricate mosaic floors, while artisans prepare the glittering tiles that will soon adorn the walls, telling biblical stories in shimmering color. This is more than a building. It is a sanctuary, a physical manifestation of divine peace in the heart of the imperial city, overlooking the Sea of Marmara. On the most desirable piece of real estate, the most ambitious project of all is underway. The Great Palace of Constantinople. This is not a single building, but a sprawling complex of reception halls, private residences, courtyards, gardens, and churches, all interconnected by corridors and porticos. It's a city within a city, the nerve center of the entire Roman world. We can almost see the sunlight glinting off the gilded roofs and the vibrant mosaics being meticulously placed, piece by tiny piece. Here, the finest marble from across the empire is being used: green from Thessaly, white from Proconnesus, rich purple from Egypt. Fountains are installed in lush gardens, their gentle splashing a counterpoint to the sounds of construction. This is where the emperor will live, where he will hold court, and from where the fate of millions will be decided. It is designed to awe and intimidate, a dazzling display of imperial wealth and power. Let's pause and take in the sheer scale of this endeavor. From 324 to 330 AD, this peninsula is the largest construction site in the world. Ships constantly arrive at the Golden Horn, their hulls laden with precious materials: marble, timber, gold, silver, and countless classical statues plundered from older cities like Rome, Athens, and Ephesus. Constantine is not just building anew. He is transplanting the soul of old Rome, its art and its history, into this new body. The city is a paradox, entirely new, yet filled with the venerable relics of the past. Thousands of craftsmen, architects, sculptors, and laborers toil from sunrise to sunset. The air buzzes with a symphony of languages from every corner of the empire, all united in this singular, monumental task. As the years pass, the skeletal structures we first saw are fleshed out. The walls are topped with battlements and towers. The Forum is adorned with statues of heroes and gods of old. The Hagia Irian's dome prepares to catch the light. The palace complex becomes a labyrinth of opulence. Streets are paved, aqueducts are built to supply fresh water, and a colossal hippodrome, a venue for chariot races and public spectacles, is expanded to rival Rome's Circus Maximus. This is an urban planner's dream, executed with the full force of an emperor's will. Every corner of the city is designed to reflect its Roman heritage while embracing its new Christian identity. Finally, on May 11th, 330 AD, the work is declared complete. A grand inauguration ceremony, lasting 40 days, celebrates the birth of the city. Constantinople is officially dedicated as the new capital of the Roman Empire. The raw construction site is transformed into a living, breathing metropolis. The dust has settled, replaced by the scent of incense from the new churches and the sea breeze from the Bosporus. The clamor of hammers has given way to the chatter of citizens in the Forum, the prayers of the faithful in the Hagia Irian, and the rustle of silk in the corridors of the great palace. What Constantine and his builders achieved in just 6 years is nothing short of a miracle. They didn't just build a city, they forged an idea. The idea of an eternal, Christian, Roman Empire in the East. The walls they built would fend off invaders for 1,000 years. The churches they founded would shape the future of Orthodox Christianity. The palace they constructed would be the envy of the world. Constantinople, the queen of cities, was born, a testament to a grand vision, built with marble, gold, and unwavering ambition. Thank you so much for joining us on this incredible journey to witness the rise of Constantinople. If you enjoyed stepping back in time with us, please give this video a thumbs up and consider subscribing to our channel for more deep dives into the world's greatest historical stories. We love hearing from you, so leave a comment below and let us know what you think. Until next time, stay curious. Hello and welcome back to our journey through history. Today, we're diving into one of the most pivotal moments in the history of Christianity, and, by extension, the Western world. The First Council of Nicaea in 325 AD. This wasn't just a theological debate. It was an event that would shape empires, define faith for billions, and echo through the centuries. So, grab your metaphorical toga, and let's travel back to the Roman Empire under its first Christian emperor, Constantine the Great. To understand why this council was so crucial, we need to understand the man who called it. Constantine had just consolidated his power over the entire Roman Empire after years of civil war. He attributed his victory at the Battle of the Milvian Bridge to the Christian God, and he saw this new faith as a potential glue to hold his vast and diverse empire together. Unity was his ultimate goal. A united empire needed a united church, but there was a massive problem brewing, a theological storm that threatened to tear the church, and potentially his empire, apart. This storm was called the Arian controversy. At the heart of this dispute was a priest from Alexandria named Arius. He was a charismatic and influential preacher with a powerful idea. Arius taught that God the Father was supreme, eternal, and uncreated. Jesus Christ, the Son, he argued, was also divine, but he was a created being. He was the first and greatest of all creation. But there was a time when he did not exist. In Arius's view, the Son was subordinate to the Father, not co-equal and co-eternal. This might sound like a subtle point of theology, but its implications were enormous. It fundamentally questioned the nature of Jesus and, therefore, the very core of Christian belief about salvation and the Trinity. On the other side was another figure from Alexandria, a deacon named He, along with his bishop, Alexander, championed the opposing view. Athanasius argued that the Son was of the same substance as the Pater. The Greek word for this is asterisk. IHOMOOU. Asterisk. This meant that Jesus was fully God, just as the Father was fully God, not a creation, but eternally existent, co-equal, and co-eternal with the Father. For Athanasius, if Jesus were anything less than fully God, he couldn't be the savior of humanity. The divine bridge between God and man would be incomplete. This debate wasn't just confined to scholarly circles. It spilled out into the streets, the markets, and the docks. Imagine sailors and shopkeepers arguing passionately about the divine nature of Christ. The controversy was causing deep divisions throughout the eastern part of the empire. For Constantine, this was a political disaster in the making. He had legalized and begun to favor a religion to bring unity, and now that very religion was fracturing from within. He couldn't have that. He tried to solve it with letters, urging Arius and Alexander to reconcile, essentially telling them to agree to disagree on what he saw as minor points. But this wasn't a minor point. It was everything. When his letters failed, Constantine took an unprecedented step. He decided to summon bishops from across the Christian world to a single location to settle the matter once and for all. He chose the city of Nicaea, located in modern-day Turkey, conveniently close to his new capital, Constantinople. He even paid for the bishops' travel and lodging. This was a demonstration of imperial power and a clear signal that the emperor was now the protector and, in many ways, the overseer of the church. In the summer of 325 AD, over 300 bishops gathered for what would become known as the First Ecumenical Council. The council was a spectacle. Bishops, many of whom still bore the scars of persecution from just a few years earlier, now sat in an imperial palace, deliberating under the watchful eye of the Roman emperor himself. Constantine opened the council, not as a theological expert, but as a statesman, urging them to find harmony and restore unity. The debates were intense. Arius and his supporters presented their case, but the majority of bishops found his views deeply troubling. The turning point was the promotion of Athanasius's key term, homusios, of the same substance. It was a clear, unambiguous statement against Arianism. The Son was not merely like the Father. He was the Father in substance and divinity. This concept became the cornerstone of the creed the council began to draft. Their goal was to create a definitive statement of faith that every Christian could assent to, leaving no room for the Arian interpretation. What emerged from these debates is one of the most important documents in Christian history, the Nicene Creed. The original 325 AD version was short and to the point. It begins, "We believe in one God, the Father Almighty, maker of all things visible and invisible." Then comes the critical section about the Son. "And in one Lord Jesus Christ, the Son of God, begotten of the Father, the only begotten, that is, of the essence of the Father, God of God, light of light, very God, a very God begotten, a made being of one substance homusios with the Father." It left no doubt. The creed explicitly condemned the core tenets of Arianism, stating, "But those who say, there was a time when he was not, and he was not before it was made, they are condemned by the Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church." At the end of the council, almost all the bishops present signed the new creed. Arius and a couple of his staunchest allies refused and were promptly excommunicated and exiled by order of the emperor. Constantine had what he wanted, a near-unanimous declaration of faith. He saw the creed as a law of the empire, a standard of orthodoxy that would ensure the religious unity he so desperately craved. He had successfully merged the authority of the state with the authority of the church to define belief. However, the story doesn't end there. Nicaea didn't magically solve the problem overnight. In fact, the Arian controversy would rage for another half a century. Emperors after Constantine would flip-flop, sometimes supporting the Arian side, at other times the Nicene side. Athanasius himself was exiled no fewer than 5 times. The political and theological battles continued. But the Council of Nicaea had drawn a clear line in the sand. It established a precedent for how the Church would handle major doctrinal disputes through councils, and it created the foundational creed that, with some later modifications at the Council of Constantinople, would become the standard of belief for Catholic, Orthodox, and most Protestant churches to this very day. So, the Council of Nicaea was far more than just an ancient religious meeting. It was the moment where the Roman Empire and the Christian Church formally intertwined their destinies. It was where the fundamental nature of Jesus was defined from mainstream Christianity, a definition forged in debate and enforced by imperial power. It set the stage for the next 1,700 years of Christian theology and the relationship between church and state in the Western world. It was a quest for unity, both for a faith and for an empire, and its legacy is still profoundly felt all around us. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into history. If you found this fascinating, please hit that like button, and be sure to subscribe and click the bell so you don't miss our next chapter. We love exploring these pivotal moments with you. See you next time. Hello and welcome back to our journey through history. Today, we re-diving into a pivotal moment that forever changed the course of Western civilization. The rise of Constantine and the intricate dance between emperor and church. Imagine a world where your faith could get you thrown to the lions. That was the reality for early Christians. But then, one man, one battle, and one vision changed everything. This is the story of how politics and religion became intertwined, setting a precedent that would echo for centuries. So, who was Constantine? Born in the late 3rd century, he was a brilliant military commander who fought his way to the top of the Roman Empire. The empire at that time was a chaotic mess, often split between multiple rulers all vying for ultimate power. Constantine's defining moment came in 312 AD, at the Battle of the Milvian Bridge, just outside Rome. The story goes that on the eve of the battle, he had a vision. he saw a cross of light in the heavens, emblazoned with the words, "In this sign you shall conquer." Now, whether this was a true divine miracle or a stroke of political genius, we may never know for sure. But Constantine ordered his soldiers to paint the Christian symbol Thashira on their shields. They won a decisive victory against his rival, Maxentus. For Constantine, this was proof. He wasn't just another emperor, he was God's chosen instrument on earth. This victory cemented his belief that the Christian God was a powerful ally, a God of victory who had personally selected him to rule. This is a crucial distinction to understand. Constantine didn't see himself as a priest or a bishop. He wasn't a theologian debating the finer points of Scripture. He saw himself as an emperor, a ruler, but with a divine mandate from the Christian God. His title was Pontifex Maximus, the greatest bridge builder, which was the traditional title for the high priest of the old Roman state religion. He kept this title, but he repurposed it. He was now the bridge between the divine and the mortal realm, the protector and overseer of the Christian faith. This new role was on full display with the Edict of Milan in 339. Along with his co-emperor, Licinius, Constantine declared an end to the persecution of Christians. This edict granted religious tolerance throughout the empire. It was a revolutionary act. Suddenly, Christianity went from being a persecuted, underground sect to a legally recognized, and soon, favored religion. Constantine began pouring imperial funds into building magnificent churches, like the original St. Peter's Basilica in Rome and the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. He gave bishops legal authority and privileges, essentially making them part of the state's administrative machinery. But with great power comes great responsibility. And great problems. As Christianity grew, so did its internal divisions. The biggest controversy of the era was Arianism, a theological dispute about the nature of Jesus Christ. Was Jesus divine and equal to God the Father? Or was he a created being, subordinate to the Father? This wasn't just an academic debate. It was tearing the church apart and threatening the stability of Constantine's empire. An empire divided by faith was a weak empire. So, what does God's chosen ruler do? He calls a meeting. In 325 AD, Constantine convened the First Council of Nicaea. He brought together bishops from all over the empire, paying for their travel and accommodations. Picture this. The emperor, who not long ago would have been ordering their persecution, is now presiding over their most important theological council. He wasn't there to vote on doctrine. He saw his role as ensuring order and unity. He urged the bishops to reach a consensus, to create a unified statement of faith that would end the Arian controversy. The result was the Nicene Creed, a foundational statement of Christian belief that affirmed the full divinity of Jesus. This was a landmark moment. For the first time, an emperor had directly intervened to solve an internal church dispute. Constantine had effectively made Christian orthodoxy a matter of imperial policy. He saw a unified church as essential for a unified empire. He wasn't just a protector. He was a manager, an enforcer of religious unity for the good of the state. This blending of church and state is often called Kaiseropapism, the idea that the secular ruler, Caesar, also holds authority over the church, the Pope, or Papa. Constantine laid the groundwork for this model, which would become the standard in the Eastern Roman, or Byzantine, Empire for the next 1,000 years. The emperor was seen as the living icon of Christ, responsible for both the spiritual and physical well-being of his subjects. He appointed patriarchs, called church councils, and enforced their decisions with the power of the state. However, in the western part of the empire, things developed differently. As the Western Roman Empire crumbled in the 5th century, a power vacuum emerged. There was no strong emperor in Rome to dominate the church. Instead, the Bishop of Rome, the Pope, stepped into that void. Figures like Pope Leo the Great and Pope Gregory the Great became not just spiritual leaders but also political and civic leaders, defending the city, negotiating with invaders, and organizing social services. This set the stage for a very different relationship in the West, one characterized by centuries of power struggles between popes and kings, each claiming ultimate authority. So, Constantine's legacy is incredibly complex. Was he a pious believer or a shrewd politician? The answer is likely both. He genuinely seems to have believed in the power of the Christian God, but he also masterfully used that faith to consolidate his power, unify his empire, and establish a new kind of rule. He transformed the Roman Empire and, in doing so, created a new framework for the relationship between political and religious authority by positioning himself as God's chosen ruler, not a priest, but a divinely appointed overseer. Constantine created a model that would shape the concept of monarchy and the state in Europe for over a millennium. The idea of the divine right of kings has its roots in the world that Constantine built. The debates over the separation of church and state that continue to this day are, in many ways, a continuation of the conversation he started. His reign marks the moment when the cross and the eagle, faith and empire, became inextricably linked, for better and for worse. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into one of history's most fascinating figures. The story of Constantine is a powerful reminder of how ideas and beliefs can shape the world in profound and lasting ways. If you found this interesting, please hit that like button. And be sure to subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss our next chapter. We love hearing from you. So drop your thoughts and questions in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious. Was Constantine the Great the first Christian emperor, also secretly Rome's last pagan emperor? This question might sound like a contradiction, but the story of Constantine is filled with them. He's the man who saw a cross in the sky before a decisive battle, yet his triumphal arch in Rome is covered in images of pagan gods. He's the emperor who convened the Council of Nicaea to unify Christian doctrine, but he also held the pagan title of Pontifex Maximus, the chief priest of Rome, his entire life. To understand this paradox, we have to step back into the chaotic world of the 4th century Roman Empire. Imagine a world where centuries-old traditions were clashing with a powerful new faith. For Romans, the gods weren't just stories. They were part of the very fabric of their identity, their government, and their daily lives. The prosperity of the empire was believed to depend on maintaining the pax deorum, the peace with the gods, through specific rituals and sacrifices. To turn your back on Jupiter, Mars, and the others was not just a personal choice, it was seen as a betrayal of Rome itself. This was the world Constantine was born into. His father was a follower of Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun, a popular solar deity. So, from a young age, Constantine was immersed in this rich tapestry of Roman paganism. But Christianity was on the rise. Despite periods of intense persecution, the faith was spreading like wildfire through the empire. Its message of hope, community, and eternal life resonated with people from all walks of life. By the early 4th century, Christians were a significant minority, a powerful and organized force within the state. When Constantine and his rivals battled for control of the empire, they weren't just fighting over territory. They were fighting for the soul of Rome. Each contender had their divine patrons. For Constantine, a dramatic shift occurred before the Battle of the Milvian Bridge in 312. According to the historian Eusebius, Constantine looked up to the sun and saw a cross of light above it, with the words in this sign, "You will conquer." That night, he had a dream in which Christ appeared to him and told him to use the sign as a defensive symbol. Constantine ordered his soldiers to paint the Chiro, a Christian symbol, on their shields. They won a stunning victory against a much larger force, and Constantine was convinced. He saw the Christian God as a powerful patron of victory, a divine ally who had granted him the ultimate prize, Rome. From that moment on, his journey as the first Christian emperor began. But the path wasn't a straight line. After his victory, did Constantine immediately tear down pagan temples and force everyone to convert? Absolutely not. That would have been political suicide. The Roman Senate, the army, and the majority of the population were still pagan. Instead, Constantine played a masterful political game. He enacted the Edict of Milan in 313, which granted religious tolerance to everyone, including Christians. This wasn't about making Christianity the only religion, but about ending the persecution and placing it on equal footing with the traditional cults. It was a revolutionary act of pragmatism. He understood that he had to rule a diverse empire, not just a Christian one. Let's look at the evidence for his continued pagan leanings. For starters, there's the coinage. 4 years after his conversion, Constantine's coins continued to feature pagan gods, especially Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun god of his father. This wasn't just about honoring his dad. The sun was a powerful, universal symbol that could be interpreted in different ways. For pagans, it was Sol. For some Christians, Christ was the sun of righteousness. Constantine brilliantly used this ambiguous imagery to appeal to both sides. He was a master of public relations, creating a visual language everyone could get behind. Then there's his new capital, Constantinople. When he founded this new Rome on the site of the ancient Greek city of Byzantium, the dedication ceremony was a fascinating blend of old and new. While he built magnificent churches like the Hagia Irene, he also reportedly had an ancient statue of the goddess Tyche, the personification of fortune, placed in the city. A massive column in the city's forum was topped with a statue of himself, but in the guise of Apollo or Sol Invictus, with rays emanating from his head. Was he presenting himself as a sun god, or was he using familiar imagery to represent his divine-given authority? The line is incredibly blurry. This duality continued throughout his reign. He passed laws favoring the Christian clergy, giving them tax exemptions and legal authority. He poured imperial funds into building churches across the empire, from Jerusalem to Rome. Yet, he retained the title of Pontifex Maximus, the head of the pagan state religion. This allowed him to oversee all religious matters in the empire, including the pagan cults. It was a position of immense power and tradition, one he was not willing to give up. He was bridging two worlds, acting as the head of the old faith while championing the new. So why this balancing act? Some historians argue Constantine's conversion was purely a cynical move to harness the growing power of the Christian church for his own gain. They point to his ruthless actions, like executing his own wife and eldest son, as proof that he wasn't a true, pious believer. They argue that he simply saw which way the wind was blowing and chose the winning side. It's an interesting theory, but it perhaps oversimplifies the man and his time. A purely political conversion doesn't fully explain the genuine favor he showed the church or his deep personal involvement in theological debates. Another perspective is that his understanding of Christianity evolved over time. His initial conversion might have been more about finding a powerful new divine protector, not so different from how a Roman general would seek the favor of Mars. He saw the Christian God as the strongest God, the one who brought victory. Over the years, through his interactions with bishops and his deep dive into theological disputes like the Arian controversy at the Council of Nicaea, his faith may have deepened and become more sophisticated. He may have started as a soldier who found a winning formula and ended as a genuine, flawed believer. This brings us to his baptism, which is perhaps the most confusing part of his story for modern observers. Constantine waited until he was on his deathbed in 337 to be formally baptized. Why wait so long? In the 4th century, baptism was seen as a complete washing away of all previous sins. Many Christians believed you only got one shot at it. So, some people, especially those in positions of power who might have to make ruthless decisions, delayed baptism until the very end to ensure they entered the afterlife with a clean slate. For an emperor who had to command armies, levy taxes, and sentence people to death, waiting until the end of his life made a certain kind of practical, spiritual sense. In the end, calling Constantine the last pagan emperor is a provocative but useful label. He wasn't a pagan in the traditional sense after 312. But he ruled in a pagan style. He used pagan symbols, held pagan titles, and governed a predominantly pagan empire with a careful, pragmatic hand. He was a transitional figure, a man with one foot in the Roman past and one foot in the Christian future. He didn't tear the old world down. He built a bridge to a new one, using stones from both sides of the river. His legacy is not one of simple piety, but of complex, brilliant, and sometimes brutal statesmanship. He forever changed the course of Western civilization, creating a new Roman Empire where the cross would eventually replace the eagle as its defining symbol. Thanks for watching. If you found this dive into Constantine's complicated faith interesting, be sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more journeys into the fascinating corners of history. See you next time. Hello, and welcome back. We've journeyed with Constantine through battlefields and monumental reforms, witnessing the birth of a new era. But history isn't just about grand victories and public decrees. It's also written in the quiet, shadowed corridors of power, where personal dramas unfold with devastating consequences. Today, we delve into one of the most enigmatic and tragic chapters of Constantine's life, a story that stains his legacy and reveals the immense, soul-crushing weight of the imperial crown. The year is 326 AD. The Roman Empire is celebrating the 20th anniversary of Constantine's reign. There are games, festivals, and an air of triumph. At the heart of these celebrations should be two key figures: Crispus, Constantine's eldest son, and Fausta, his wife and the mother of his other heirs. Crispus was the golden child, a brilliant military commander who had won decisive naval victories. He was popular with the army, admired by the people, and seen by all as the natural successor, the future of the empire. Fausta was the daughter of an emperor, the wife of another, and the mother of 3 future emperors. She was at the very center of imperial power. Then, in a shocking and swift turn of events, the dream shatters. While in Pola, Crispus is arrested, tried for an unspeakable crime, and executed on his father's orders. The exact charge is lost to history, but whispers and rumors filled the void. Had he conspired against his father? Was he involved in a forbidden affair? The official records are silent. Scrub it clean, leaving a chilling void where a prince's life used to be. The empire was stunned. Why would Constantine, a ruler who preached Christian forgiveness and unity, eliminate his own brilliant and beloved son? The tragedy deepens just a few months later. The Empress Fausta, who had been with Constantine for nearly 2 decades, is celso killed. The method of her death is grimly reported by later historians. Suffocated in an overheated bath. The story that coalesces from the fragments of history is one of dark court intrigue. The most common theory, popularized by the historian Zosimus, suggests that Fausta, perhaps jealous of her stepson Crispus's popularity and fearing for her own son's inheritance, falsely accused him of trying to seduce her. Imagine Constantine's horror. Believing his wife, he orders the execution of the son he once cherished. But then, the truth, or at least a version of it, comes to light. It's said that Constantine's own mother, Helena, devastated by the loss of her favorite grandson, confronted Constantine and revealed Fausta's deception. Overcome with grief and rage at this ultimate betrayal, Constantine then condemns his wife to death. It's a story worthy of a Greek tragedy. A tale of jealousy, lies, and a father's terrible, irreversible mistake. But is this the whole story? We must be cautious. These accounts were written decades, sometimes centuries, later. Often by historians who were hostile to Constantine and his Christian faith. They may have been eager to paint him as a tyrant ruled by passion, not reason. Could there be another explanation? Perhaps Crispus was genuinely involved in a political plot. In the cutthroat world of the Roman court, ambition was a dangerous game. Maybe he grew too popular, too quickly, and a faction at court convinced Constantine that his son was a threat. Or perhaps the story of Fausta's accusation is true, but her motives were different. Was it a desperate act of self-preservation in a court filled with rivals? We simply don't know. The silence from Constantine's own time is deafening. He never spoke of it publicly. He issued a *Damatio Memoria* in order to erase Crispus and Fausta from public record, to chisel their names from monuments and melt down their statues. He was trying to erase not just 2 people, but his own unbearable pain and shame. This event casts a long, dark shadow over Constantine's later years. Can you imagine the weight on his soul? To have built an empire, to have reshaped the world, only to have destroyed his own family. Every edict he signed, every church he built, every prayer he offered must have been haunted by the faces of his son and his wife. He had won the world, but had suffered a loss that no amount of power could ever restore. This was the curse of absolute authority, the isolation, the paranoia, and the terrifying finality of his decisions. This tragedy reveals the man behind the imperial purple. He wasn't just a symbol or a saint. He was a father and a husband who made a terrible, tragic choice. Whether he was a duped victim or a ruthless tyrant in that moment, he was undeniably a broken man. He would go on to rule for another decade, founding his great city of Constantinople and solidifying his new Christian empire. But the court would never be the same. The succession was now secured for Fausta's sons, but it was a legacy born from blood and betrayal. The story of Crispus and Faustus serves as a somber reminder that the lives of even the greatest historical figures are often filled with profound personal sorrow. The crown Constantine wore was not just made of gold and jewels. It was lined with the thorns of suspicion, grief, and regret. It is a stark lesson in the corrupting nature of absolute power and the deep human costs of ambition. Thank you for joining me for this more somber reflection on Constantine's reign. The brightest lights often cast the darkest shadows. If you found this exploration of history's complexities meaningful, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next chapter. We appreciate you being part of our community. See you next time. In the year 337 AD, the man who had reshaped an empire, who had seen a cross in the sky and conquered under its sin, felt his own mortality approaching. Constantine the Great, the Augustus, the victor of 100 battles, was falling ill. For a life lived on the grandest of stages, his final act would be one of quiet, profound intimacy. He was near Nicomedia, a city that had witnessed so much of his rise. But now, the clamor of legions and the debates of councils faded into the background. The weight of the purple robes, the burden of a diadem he had forged himself, seemed to grow heavier with each passing day. He had been a force of nature, a man who moved armies and built cities, who had wrestled with the very soul of the Roman world, and steered it onto a new, uncertain course. But now, he was simply a man, facing the one frontier no emperor could conquer. For decades, Constantine had walked a unique path. He was the patron of the church, the convener of the Council of Nicaea, the man who ended the great persecutions. He had showered bishops with honors and built magnificent basilicas. Yet, he himself had remained outside the formal gates of the faith he so publicly championed. He was a catechumen, a learner, delaying his own baptism. Why? The reasons are debated by historians to this day. Perhaps it was a political calculation, a way to remain a figure of unity for both Christians and pagans within his vast empire. Or perhaps it was a deeply personal, spiritual belief. In the 4th century, many believed that baptism washed away all prior sins, a complete and total cleansing. To be baptized on one's deathbed, therefore, was to enter the afterlife in a state of perfect purity, with no chance to commit further transgressions. For a man whose life was a tapestry of power, politics, and bloodshed, this final absolution may have been the ultimate prize. As his strength waned, Constantine knew the time had come. He set aside the imperial purple, the symbol of his earthly power that he had worn for over 30 years. In its place, he requested the simple, pure white robes of a neophyte, a newcomer to the faith. Imagine the scene. The emperor, stripped of his regalia, lying not in a palace but in a villa, surrounded not by generals and senators, but by priests and bishops. The man who had commanded the known world was now humbly asking for entry into the kingdom of God. The bishop of Nicomedia, Eusebius Na, to be confused with the more famous historian of the same name, was summoned. The air in the room was not one of panic or despair, but of serene, focused purpose. The water of baptism was prepared. This wasn't the dramatic, public immersion in a river that we might picture. It was a solemn, quiet anointing. As the water touched his brow, a lifetime of burdens began to lift. The memories of the Milvian Bridge, the blood spilled in civil wars, the complex political maneuvers, the execution of his own son Crispus and wife Faustul, the heavy dark stones that build an emperor wore in this moment of faith washed clean. Constantine reportedly spoke after the rite, his voice perhaps weak, but his words filled with a newfound peace. He expressed a joy he had never known, a certainty that he was now on the path to divine light. He refused to ever again don the imperial purple, choosing to remain in his white baptismal garments. The emperor was gone. In his place was a brother in Christ, awaiting his journey home. It was a profound statement. The most powerful man in the world had concluded that his ultimate identity, the one he wished to carry into eternity, was not that of an emperor, but that of a redeemed soul. His death was not a violent end in battle or a clandestine poisoning in the palace, the typical fate of so many Roman rulers. It was a quiet passing, a gentle letting go. On the day of Pentecost, a major Christian feast, Constantine the Great, drew his last breath. He had laid down the sword, laid down the crown, and in doing so, he had found a peace that neither could ever provide. His body was transported to the city he had built, Constantinople, and laid to rest in the Church of the Holy Apostles, a mausoleum he had constructed for himself. He was placed in the center, surrounded by 12 cenotaphs, symbolic tombs for the 12 apostles. In death, as in life, Constantine positioned himself at the very heart of the Christian story, the 13th apostle, as some would call him. The death of Constantine was more than the end of a single, remarkable life. It was a symbolic moment for the entire Roman Empire. It was the final, definitive seal on his life's work. The man who had legalized Christianity, who had sponsored it and elevated it, had, in his final moments, fully embraced it. He laid down the burdens of empire and faith, not as a defeated man, but as one who had completed his race. His final act was not a command, but a surrender to a power he believed to be greater than his own. And in that serenity, he secured his legacy not just as a great emperor, but as the first Christian emperor, from his first battle to his very last breath. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the final moments of Constantine the Great. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, please consider liking this video, subscribing to the channel for more deep dives into history, and hitting that notification bell so you never miss an update. Your support means the world. See you next time. As we stand at the end of this long and winding road, looking back at the life of one of history's true giants, we must ask, what is his ultimate legacy? It's not just a story of battles won or laws written. It's the story of how one man's vision fundamentally reshaped the world. Let's start with the most profound shift: the survival and triumph of Christianity. Before him, Christianity was a faith under siege, its followers scattered and persecuted. He didn't just end the persecution, he threw the immense weight of the Roman Empire behind it. By convening the Council of Nicaea, he sought to unify a fractured church, laying the groundwork for Christian orthodoxy that would define Western civilization for over 1,000 years. Without his intervention, it's entirely possible Christianity might have remained a minor sect, one among many in the diverse religious landscape of the late Roman Empire. Instead, it became the bedrock of a new European identity. His conversion wasn't just a personal choice. It was an event that set the course for continents and millennia. Then, there is the city, Constantinople, not just a new capital, but a new Rome. While the old Rome in the West would eventually crumble under the weight of invasions and internal decay, Constantinople stood as a beacon of civilization for over 1,000 years. He chose its location with strategic genius, defensible by land and sea. At the crossroads of Europe and Asia, he endowed it with magnificent churches, forums, and palaces. This city became the heart of the Byzantine Empire, a fortress that shielded Christian Europe from Eastern invasions for centuries. It preserved the classical knowledge of Greece and Rome, the very texts that would later fuel the Renaissance in the West. When we talk about the preservation of Western culture during the so-called Dark Ages, we owe an immense debt to the city he built. The walls of Constantinople were, in many ways, the walls of Christendom. His reign marks the definitive end of one era, and the dramatic beginning of another. The classical Roman world, with its pagan gods and its center of gravity in Italy, was fading. In its place, he forged a new Roman identity: Christian, Greek-speaking, and centered in the East. This was the birth of the Byzantine Empire, an entity that saw itself as the direct continuation of Rome, yet was culturally and religiously distinct. This transformation wasn't gentle, it was a seismic shift. He moved the empire's heart, changed its soul, and in doing so, created the political and cultural framework for medieval Europe. The emperors who followed, the popes who would rise in Rome, the kings of the nascent European nations all operated within a world shaped by his decisions. His legal and administrative reforms also had a lasting impact. By restructuring the army and separating civil and military authority, he created a more stable and manageable state, allowing the Eastern Empire to endure where the West failed. His economic policies, including the introduction of the solidus gold coin, provided a stable currency that facilitated trade and became the standard for centuries, long after he was gone. These weren't just temporary fixes. They were foundational elements that contributed to the longevity and prosperity of the Byzantine world. So, how do we sum up the legacy of this visionary? He was a bridge between two worlds. He stood with one foot in the classical, pagan past, and the other firmly planted in the Christian, medieval future. He was a Roman emperor who laid the foundation for a civilization that was both Roman and something entirely new. His impact is woven into the very fabric of Western and Eastern history. It's in the great cathedrals of Europe, in the legal codes that shaped nations, and in the enduring story of a city that shone like a lamp in a dark age. He was a complex figure, no doubt. A ruthless military commander and a pious saint in the eyes of the Eastern Church, a political pragmatist, and a man of genuine faith. But history is rarely made by simple men. It is made by visionaries who dare to see a different future and have the will to build it. He saw a Roman Empire on the brink of collapse and, through his vision and ambition, didn't just save it. He transformed it into something that would last for another 1,000 years, shaping the world we inhabit today. His legacy isn't just a chapter in a history book. It's a living part of our collective heritage. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through history. If you found this exploration as fascinating as I did, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. It really helps us continue to bring these incredible stories to life. We'll see you next time. And so, Constantine's eyes turned east. Not just for a new capital, but for a new world. Rome, the magnificent, eternal city, was steeped in a past he wished to move beyond. Its gods, its traditions, its very stones whispered of an old order. Constantine heard a different call, a whisper on the eastern wind, a vision of a city that would be entirely his own new Rome, born not of pagan myth, but of Christian faith and imperial ambition. He chose a location of breathtaking strategic genius, the ancient Greek city of Byzantium. It was a place blessed by geography, a natural fortress standing at the crossroads of two continents, Europe and Asia, and to seize the Mediterranean and the Black Sea. It was a commercial hub, a military choke point, and a gateway to the wealthy eastern provinces. Here, on this peninsula, he would build his dream. The year is 324 AD. Constantine, now the sole master of the Roman world, arrives to personally oversee the project. Imagine the scene. The emperor, a figure of immense power and divine authority, walking the ancient hills, tracing the boundaries of his future capital with a spear. When his companions, amazed at the vast circuit he was marking, asked how much further he would go, Constantine is said to have replied, "I shall continue until he who walks before me stops." In his mind, this was not just an act of urban planning, it was a sacred duty, guided by a divine hand. Construction began at a furious pace. This was to be no mere provincial town. It was to be the equal of Rome itself. Constantine poured the vast resources of the empire into his new city. He plundered the ancient world for its treasures, not out of mere greed, but to adorn his capital with instant history and grandeur. Marble columns from the temples of Egypt, bronze statues from the shrines of Greece, and priceless artworks from across the empire were shipped to the Bosphorus. He laid out wide, colonnaded streets, forums, public baths, and a magnificent hippodrome for chariot races, echoing the Circus Maximus in Rome. He built aqueducts to supply the city with fresh water and vast underground cisterns to store it. But at the heart of it all, unlike old Rome, were the churches. The Church of the Holy Apostles, the Church of Saint Irene, and later, the magnificent Hagia Sophia, would stand as testaments to the new Christian foundation of the empire. This was a city built for a new god. On May 11, 330 AD, after just 6 years of monumental effort, the city was formally consecrated. The celebrations were spectacular, lasting for 40 days. It was named Nova Roma, New Rome, but history would remember it by the name of its founder, Constantinople, the city of Constantine. It was a statement to the world. A new center of gravity had been established. Power, wealth, and faith now flowed not to the Tiber, but to the Bosphorus. Did Constantine know what he had truly created? Did he understand that this city would not just be a capital, but a civilization? That it would stand for over 1,000 years, a beacon of light while Western Europe fell into the so-called Dark Ages? Did he foresee the mighty Theodosian walls, which would repel countless invaders? Or the shimmering golden mosaics that would inspire awe in all who saw them? Perhaps not in detail, but the dream was there. The dream of a city that was both Roman in its law and administration, and Greek in its language and culture. A city that was Christian in its soul. A city that would guard the knowledge of the ancient world and serve as a shield for Christendom. This was the dream he laid into the very foundations of Constantinople. For the next millennium, the city thrived. It became the largest and wealthiest city in Europe. Its scholars preserved the works of Plato and Aristotle. Its artisans crafted works of unparalleled beauty. Its diplomats engaged in a complex dance of power that shaped the known world. Its armies, led by legendary generals like Belisarius, fought to reclaim the lost provinces of the West. It was the envy of the world, known simply as the city. The emperors who followed Constantine would sit on his throne, ruling from the great palace, looking out over the same waters he had. They would add their own monuments, fight their own battles, and face their own critics. But they were all living within the framework of his vision. They were the custodians of his dream. The empire would evolve, face sieges, plagues, and internal strife. But the city, his city, endured. It became a legend. To the Vikings who sailed down the rivers of Russia, it was Miklagard, the great city. To the Slavs, it was Zargrad. The city of the Caesar. To all, it was a place of wonder, a repository of immense wealth and divine power. The legacy was so potent that even after its eventual fall in 1453, its new rulers, the Ottoman sultans, did not destroy it. Instead, they made it their own capital, building mosques alongside churches, adding a new layer to its impossibly rich history. And so, we end where we began, with a dream of an eternal city, a bastion of faith and power. Constantine, the first Christian emperor, planted a seed on the shores of the Bosphorus. He may have only lived to see its first blossoms, but that seed grew into a mighty tree whose branches would stretch across 1,000 years of history. Think of it not as an end, but as a continuation. The emperor's dream wasn't just built of stone and mortar. It was carried on the currents of time, whispered in the halls of power, chanted in the great churches, and defended by generations of soldiers upon its formidable walls. The sun sets over the Golden Horn, its light glinting off the waters, just as it did in Constantine's time. The city sleeps, but the dream lives on. The dream of Constantinople, the eternal city of the East, a lullaby of history sung for 1,000 years. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through the life of Constantine the Great. If you enjoyed this story and want to explore more pivotal moments in history, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. It truly helps us create more content like this for you. We'll see you in the next chapter of our shared past.